This all began about 6 months ago, after I moved into a two-story Victorian rental on the outskirts of a small Pennsylvania town. I was escaping the city, working remotely now, and thought it was the perfect quiet place to nest. The rent was cheap, the landlord seemed chill, so for a few weeks I even felt peaceful. Then one night, around the third week, I woke abruptly at 2:14 a.m. The house was deathly quiet, except for a soft, scuffling noise coming from above. It wasn't thunder, not the pipes, and definitely not my imagination. It was deliberate, like footsteps just beyond the ceiling directly above my bedroom. I lay there, unable to move. The sound faded after a minute, but it was enough to bolt me out of bed. Gradually, I opened my door, flicked on the hallway light, and crept upstairs. No one was there, the air smelled ... musty, unwashed. The floorboards were untouched, no intruder signs, no misplaced items, just the house as it always had been. I forced myself to believe it was nothing. A raccoon on the roof, old beams settling, I told myself. Still, my chest pounded until I dozed back off. Over the next few weeks, the noises became nightly. At precisely 2:07 I'd glance at the clock. I'd hear slow, deliberate walking above me. Sometimes, the scuttling would stop right over my bedroom door. I'd lie frozen, paralyzed by fear, until dawn. I tried catching it in the act. Stayed up, played YouTube on low, waited, nothing. The attic hatch shut tight. No shadow, no presence, but the sound persisted. One afternoon, when I was home early, I inspected the old built-in closet in my room. Hidden behind a false panel, I found a small square hatch perfectly cut, wood dust laden around the edges, as if recently climbed through. I hadn't seen it before. My heart jolted. This had an attic above, but I'd assumed it wasn't accessible. That discovery sent chills. I'd debated calling someone, a locksmith, police. Would I even be taken seriously? I settled on doing it myself. I bought a flimsy fold-out ladder and climbed. The attic cramped, dark, dusty, reeked of sweat and old humidity the second I opened the hatch. I aimed my phone's flashlight around. There, in a corner, were food wrappers, a clear plastic water bottle, and a rolled-up blanket. Someone had been living up there. I couldn't breathe. I stumbled back to my room, closed the hatch, and buried myself under covers, listening desperately. That night, as expected, the steps came, heavy and deliberate. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then I heard whispering right above. A garbled name or phrase I couldn't make out. The hatch rattled in despairing taps. I screamed, climbed out of bed, and dialed 911. Officer Rodriguez showed minutes later. I led her upstairs and into the attic. She peered around the corner, flashlight and gun drawn, then lowered them. "All bare bones," she said. "No footprints, no clothing, nothing left behind." I argued, the wrappers, the blanket. She nodded, not dismissive, but the attic looked as if someone was hiding there just that moment, but gone. She advised I keep the hatch sealed. Lock the doors, I agreed, but the unease lingered. I didn't sleep that night. The hum of silence weighed on me heavy. For one more week I held steady, but then one night it wasn't footsteps. It was whispering again, soft. Right through the ceiling, words I swear I heard, "You can't leave." I panicked, driving down to a friend's couch and sleeping there for safety. I didn't return to the house for days. One morning I got a call from the landlord. He said someone had spotted a man lurking on the roof, paper thin, unremarkable, wearing a hoodie, vanishing into the woods when the neighbor shone his phone light. Police were investigating, but the figure was never found. I moved out that evening. Broke the lease because I couldn't stay there anymore. I couldn't bear the idea that someone had been living above me, whispering in the night, just out of sight. It's been months now, and I still can't sleep deeply. Every creak, every rustle outside my window makes me wonder if it wasn't over. If he's still watching, still waiting for the right moment to climb back into the attic and into my bed. Because in that house, late at night, I know I wasn't alone. When I was 22, I had just finished school and was desperate to get out of my hometown. The problem was, I had almost no money. Rent was outrageous in the city I wanted to move to, and I couldn't afford my own place. Like an idiot, instead of saving up and planning smart, I jumped at the first room for rent post I found on Craigslist. It was for a house that seemed way too nice for the price, fully furnished, utilities included, and in a safe neighborhood. The guy renting it out introduced himself as Don. He was a few years older than me, maybe mid to late 20s. When I went to look at the place, he seemed friendly enough, though. Off, something about the way he kept glancing over my shoulder instead of looking at me directly, or how he repeated questions I'd already answered. The house, though, was beautiful, spotless, decorated like something from a home magazine. A few red flags went off, like how Dem never gave me a tour of the basement even when I asked, but I ignored it. I was too excited to finally have a chance at independence. I moved in 2 weeks later. Except when I arrived with my boxes, the place didn't look the same. The walls were bare. Furniture was gone, except for a cheap fold-up table in the kitchen and a sagging couch in the living room. It looked nothing like the house I'd been shown. Don brushed it off, saying the owners had taken their things back and he hadn't had time to redecorate. I felt weird about it, but I was already committed. The first few weeks were uneventful. In fact, I barely saw him. He worked nights, he said, and would sometimes vanish for days. At first, I didn't mind. I liked having the house to myself. But the longer I lived there, the stranger things got. One night, around 1:30 a.m., I woke to the sound of someone walking quickly down the hall outside my bedroom. I thought it was Dan, until I realized the footsteps were too heavy and deliberate. They stopped right outside my door. My heart was pounding. I sat frozen in bed, waiting for the knock that never came. Eventually, the footsteps moved away down the hall, then down the stairs, and finally into the garage. I thought maybe I'd dreamed it, but in the morning I found muddy shoe prints leading from the back door into the house. Don wasn't home. A week later, something even stranger happened. I woke again in the middle of the night, this time to my bedroom door handle slowly turning. I sat up in bed, whispering, "Don?" But whoever it was didn't answer. The handle stopped, then rattled hard like someone was testing how strong the lock was. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by my bed and shouted, and the rattling stopped. When I confronted Don the next day, he laughed it off, saying it was probably just the old house settling. But the look in his eyes told me he knew more than he was saying. The final straw came 2 weeks later. I'd just gotten home from work when Dan suddenly burst into my room, sweaty and panicked. "Don't leave your room tonight," he hissed. His tone wasn't friendly, it was commanding. Before I could respond, he slammed the door shut, and I heard him dragging something heavy across the hallway floor. My instincts screamed at me to get out. I quietly opened my window, slipped outside, and drove to a gas station down the road. From my car, I called the police. By the time they arrived, Dan was gone. But inside the house, they found the garage locked from the outside. When they forced it open, there was a large tarp rolled up in the corner, covered in what looked like dried blood. The cops wouldn't tell me details, but one officer muttered something about the smell making him gag. A background check revealed Don wasn't even his real name. He'd used a fake ID, and the lease paperwork he had me sign was worthless. As far as the police could tell, the house itself wasn't even his. He'd broken in, squatted there, and used Craigslist to lure people into living with him. To this day, I don't know what he wanted with me. I don't know if the footsteps that first night were his, or someone else's. I just know that I was one locked bedroom door away from being part of whatever sick plan he had. This happened last year, right after I moved into a rental house outside of Pittsburgh. It wasn't my dream place, but at 23, I was just happy to have somewhere that wasn't a studio apartment with paper-thin walls and neighbors who screamed at each other every other night. The house was old, built sometime in the late 60s. It wasn't falling apart, but everything about it had this off-kilter feeling, like a copy of a copy that had lost its sharpness. The floors creaked in odd patterns. The staircase was unusually steep, the upstairs hallway narrow enough that if you stretched both arms out, you could almost touch both walls at once. Even the doors felt wrong thin, flimsy, as if they could be pushed open with a little pressure even if locked. But the rent was cheap. My landlord was a quiet older guy who lived only a few blocks away, and the place was close to my job at the grocery store. I told myself that the weird vibes were just in my head. Old houses creak, old houses smell. I wasn't about to start thinking like those people who see a shadow and immediately decide they're reliving in a horror movie. The first couple of weeks were fine. My schedule was predictable long shifts, usually ending late at night, then home, shower, eat, pass out, repeat. I didn't really invite anyone over. I didn't know anyone in the area well enough yet, and most of my old friends were still back in my hometown. So nights in that house were quiet, sometimes a little too quiet. The kind where you catch yourself turning the TV on just for background noise. 2 weeks in, I came home around midnight to something strange. The porch light, the one I had never touched because I was sure it didn't even work, was on. At first, I figured maybe the landlord had stopped by and fixed it. But when I stepped inside and checked the switch, it was still in the OFF position. I stood there staring at it for a minute, trying to convince myself it was just a wiring glitch. It was an old house, old wiring, old everything. Nothing to freak out about. Still, that weird little feeling like I'd walked into the wrong house stuck with me all evening. That night, while I was in the shower, I heard it for the first time. Footsteps. They weren't faint, not the kind you dismiss as the house settling or pipes shifting. They were slow, deliberate creaks along the hallway right outside the bathroom door. I froze. My heart thudded so hard it drowned out the sound of the water. The steps stopped right outside. I could feel it. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually I turned off the shower, grabbed a towel, and yanked the door open. The hallway was empty. But what shook me more wasn't what I saw, it was what I smelled. A sour, sweaty odor hung in the air. It wasn't mine. It wasn't there before. And it faded so quickly, like whoever or whatever had been there had just moved away. I told myself it was nothing. Stress, imagination, maybe the drain smell rising up weird. I forced myself to sleep. The next night, it happened again. I was in bed this time, scrolling through my phone, when I heard the same creaking steps. They started at the far end of the hallway and slowly made their way toward my bedroom. My door was shut, and I was staring at the thin crack of light at the bottom, absolutely frozen, as the shadow of something blocked the light. It just stood there. No movement, no sound, just blocking out the light. I don't know how long it lasted, but I swear it was minutes. Eventually, I snapped, jumped up, and swung the door open. The hallway was empty again. The sour smell was back. I checked the entire house that night. Closet doors, basement, kitchen, nothing. The front door was still locked, windows all shut. But when I went back to my room, I noticed something. The hatch inside my closet ceiling, which I had assumed was sealed shut, looked slightly different. A faint dust line showed where it had been moved. That's when it clicked. There was an attic. And if someone was in my house, that's where they'd be. I wanted to call the cops right then, but another part of me thought about how it would sound. Yeah, hi, I think there's a smelly guy living in my attic because I smelled sweat in the hallway and heard creaking. They'd laugh me off. I didn't have proof. So I dragged a chair into my closet, reached up, and tugged the hatch. The ladder creaked down, and instantly a wave of stale, foul air hit me. It was the same smell, stronger. My phone light cut through just a sliver of the attic space, but what I saw nearly made me drop the phone. At the far end, by a tiny window, were piles of fast food wrappers, empty water bottles, and what looked like an old blanket. Someone had been living up there. I stumbled back so fast I nearly fell off the chair. I slammed the hatch shut and shoved the chair against it. My hands were shaking as I called the landlord first, then the cops. When they came, they searched the attic. Nobody was there. Just trash, bedding, and a small backpack with clothes that didn't belong to me. The police said it was probably a homeless squatter. He'd been using the attic as shelter and maybe sneaking down at night for food or water when I was asleep or gone. They changed the locks, told me to keep the hatch sealed, and said to call again if anything else happened. For a few days, I thought that was the end of it, until the noises started again. This time, they weren't coming from the hallway. They were coming from inside my bedroom closet. I woke up to faint scratching like nails against wood, and when I turned toward the closet, I saw the hatch was slightly ajar, just barely. I didn't move. I couldn't. My chest felt like it was being crushed. And then, very slowly, the hatch lifted higher. A pale hand gripped the edge. That was all I needed to see. I bolted out of the room, slammed the door, and ran straight outside into the freezing night, dialing 911 again. By the time the cops showed up, the closet was empty. The hatch was wide open, and the attic was the same as before: trash, bedding, nothing else. They never found him. I moved out a week later, breaking my lease and paying the penalty just to get away. The landlord didn't argue. He heard the cops had been called twice, and didn't he want the trouble. It's been almost a year now, and I'm in a different apartment. Safer, newer, no attic, no basement, no creepy little hiding places. But sometimes when I'm falling asleep, I swear I hear the faint creak of footsteps outside my door. And when I close my eyes, I see that pale hand reaching down from the attic, as if whoever he was isn't finished with me yet.